Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I hope all of you are doing good. Thank you so much for joining for today's webinar. Hi, Arman. Hi, Hiral, Manish. I can see a lot of familiar names. Thank you so much for joining our sessions continuously. Thank you so much for being part of our journey continuously. Okay, so before we start today's session, one note like I would like to communicate like this is going to be really interesting topic, great place to work. So would request all the participants, like whatever questions, queries you have in your mind, please post it in the chat box. Let's have the interactive session. You are going to truly enjoy the session. All right. So it's 3 o'clock. We are all set to begin with our today's webinar. Once again, good afternoon, everyone. And once again, a very warm welcome to all of you. Let us start with our today's webinar without wasting more time. Thank you so much for joining. When people think of a great workplace, they often picture an organization with lavish perks, fancy parties, and amazing benefits. While all those elements are present in many of the well known best workplaces, the definition of a great workplace goes far deeper than perks and benefits. In fact, at its core, a great workplace is about level of trust that employee experience in their leaders, the level of pride they have in their jobs, and the extent to which they enjoy their colleagues. There are many ways to assess a workplace, but a great place to work is one that inspires the passion of workers and allows them to use their talent. Workers are motivated more by what they do or who they work for or with whom they are working. They work more for the pride and for the happiness they have with respect to their organization and colleagues rather than those kind of typical reasons. So thank you so much for being part of this very inspiring session where our esteemed speaker who knows in and out about a great workplace will be sharing his valuable experiences and taking you through his professional journey. Once again, HRAI welcomes you all to our session, Tangle to Untangle, their perspective straight from their experiences on the topic, Great Place to Work. To know more about our organization, HR Association of India, I would request all the participants to visit the link and details, which is posted in the chat window. I would also request all of you to please follow the webinar guidelines and code of conduct, which is mentioned in the chat window for your reference. As you know, like before a question and answer session, we will be running a short poll to capture your valuable feedback. It will be really helpful for us to improve for our other webinars. So please do provide your feedback. Now it is my immense pleasure to introduce our esteemed speaker for today, Mr. Prasenjit Bhattacharya, founder director, Great Place to Work Institute, India. Mr. Prasenjit Bhattacharya has over 2 decades of experience in Indian and multinational corporations like HSBC, ECS Limited, Siemens, and Crompton Greaves. Prasenjit has worked closely as an internal HR consultant and as an external consultant with senior leadership team at various organizations in the area of change management. Prasenjit is the founder director of Great Place to Work in India. the world's leading institute doing research in creating great workplaces. He is a co-founder and CEO of Great Manager Institute. In his previous stint in consulting, Prasenjit has worked widely in various areas in HR and in service quality and in TQM in industries ranging from telecom, cement, heavy engineering, automotive, components, dairy products, softwares, and hotels. Prasenjit has done his MA in personal management and industrial relations from Tata Institute of Social Science and is married to Pooja, who is an MA in family and child welfare, working as a freelance consultant to social organization and non-governmental organization. A very warm welcome to you, sir, from Team HRAI and all the participants present here today.
Thank you. Thank you, Nehali.
Yeah, thank you so much. Next, I would like to welcome and introduce our speaker cum moderator for today's session, Ms. Sindhu Kalyan Sundaram, founder, Ignite Academy and Sarva Happiness. Ms. Sindhu brings in rich experience in organizational development and management consulting. Her experience spans across retail, banking, and financial services, loyalty marketing, FMCG, IT consulting, agriculture, BPO, manufacturing, engineering, etc. Having worked across India and United Kingdom with GE, Nestle, Infosys, Cognizant, New Look Retailers, Athenian International. She is the founder of Ignite Academy and Sarva Happiness. She helps organizations to enable and enhance employee happiness levels as well as effectiveness. Most importantly, she works in enhancing organizations create a sense of belonging for their people. She has worked with global audiences and culture. Some of the companies she has delivered workshops are Bicon, Aditya Birla, HCL Technologies, Marico, Larsons and Turbo, L&T Valves, Sheshakir, Tesco, LG Equipments, and many more. She also holds a postgraduate degree in marketing and information technology from SP Jain Institute of Management and Research from Mumbai. Once again, a very warm welcome to Ms. Sindhu from all of us from Team HRAI and all the participants. Thank you so much for joining us today. I now request you to take over to this session.
Thank you, Nehali. It's wonderful to be back at HRAI. So there's this beautiful poetry of all the world's a stage and all men and women are merely players. Some have their exits and some have their entrances. And one man in his lifetime plays many parts. This is one of my favorite pieces of poetry, and I think it beautifully summarizes the role that each one of us play or the multiple roles that we don throughout our journey on this earth. And today it's my pleasure to go beyond and explore the many roles that this gentleman has donned over the years and is probably yet to don many more. I'm looking forward to listening to more interesting stories. Mr. Prasenjit, it's a pleasure having to have this conversation with you on behalf of HRAI and the audience. I extend a warm welcome to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sindhu. You are very kind. And while you are at it, I just happened to go to your LinkedIn profile and I was amazed at the multifaceted personality that you are and everything that you have done. So, please pardon me if I end up asking you questions about your journey as much as you would like to ask me.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Prasenjit, like I was telling you, we all know you as the founder, director of Great Places to Work. And from Nehali's introduction, and of course, from your LinkedIn profile, we know about the kind of the professional journey that you've had. Why don't we make this a story and why don't you tell us about the face behind the professional story? For example, we would like to listen to you more about the values that have shaped you as a person.
Well, maybe what I can do is try and pick up a few stories to illustrate why I feel strongly about a few things. So my story is not unusual in the sense that like many others, when I grew up, our family was not rich. My father was a government employee, and so his salary was not very much, and therefore we, like many others, did not have everything that we wanted to have. Now, one of the things that he and my mother kept telling me, and we became fiercely proud of, was the fact that he was very honest. Those days, just to give you an idea, when you come with somebody comes with a marriage proposal for someone who is in government service, they used to ask two questions. The first one was, what is your salary? And the second was, what is your income? Now, in case of my father, salary and income was the same. And I think that is not the most interesting part. We all know that we have had amazing number of people who have moved from lower middle class to higher middle class, and from people below poverty levels to middle class, after independence. I think what is interesting is my parents never allowed the fact that I did not have the latest textbooks to be a reason for not doing well in studies. And my father used to say that honesty can never be an excuse for coming second. And that stood in my mind. And in fact, much later, when I did really well in my studies and I went to a public school in Delhi, there was another incident that happened which was very interesting in retrospect. So I was in the hostel, and there was a bully who actually, while we were in the dining room, I used to have glasses even then at class 11. And so he took my glasses and refused to give it back to me. And I didn't realize that he has taken it because, he never acknowledged, and I didn't see who had taken it. Much later, my roommate, who was also on the same table, he said that, this guy's taking your glasses. Now, what do I do? Because he's a bully. You can't face him because he's going to beat you up. And so he gave me a bright idea. So we bunked our classes, came back to the hostel. We went into his room. We broke open his lock. In his cupboard, we found 250 rupees. So my friend gave me this idea that, this belongs to you because he took your glasses. So why don't you take the money and buy yourself a set of new glasses? And that's what I proceeded to do. And, interestingly, at that age, I remember going to some shop in Tilak Nagar in Delhi. And instead of buying glasses, I bought a pair of roller skates because, they were very attractive. But that is not the end. During the summer holidays, it seemed that my roommate squealed on me. And therefore, after the summer holidays, when I came back, there was this whole gang of people ready because, they have caught a thief. I had stolen 250 rupees. And that was, in the middle of the night, they took me to the roof of the hostel. And I was beaten black and blue by a group of 50 boys. And I had blood on my face. I had to be taken to the nursing home, which is also in the school compound later on. But the interesting thing is, throughout that beating, the image of my father kept coming in my mind. And I would not admit that I had stolen 250 rupees. And it's so much so that those guys were convinced that if somebody can take this much of beating for $250 and he's still saying that he has not taken it, then obviously he must be saying the truth. Now, the reason I mention this is that the thought of bringing disrepute to your family who did not have much money, but who had only their honesty and their credibility and their integrity to hold on to, that was unthinkable. And therefore, the decision that I had taken was that I'll never join the private sector because, those days I was told that you have to do all kinds of things like bribe the inspector who comes and stuff like that. And much later, the turning point in my life happened when I came to an institute called Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai. That was in 1989. And I'll just tell you one more thing and then maybe you can build on it. So TISS is a social science institute, and bulk of their departments are to do with social science like family and child welfare and medical, psychiatric, social work, etc. And till that point in time, I come from the Northeast. When I was in my hostel in Delhi, people used to laugh at my Hindi because I would speak in both Hindi, English. I would speak with an accent, and I still have my accent. And people would laugh at my accent. And when I started speaking in TISS with the same accent, suddenly the bulk of the people would find it very interesting. And people would say, "Oh, it's very cute, the way you speak." Now, I was like amazed because for the first time, I realized that being different is not something that, that you need to laugh at. Being different can be very interesting. People may actually be interested in you because you are different in any way, right? And to cut a long story short, I got elected as the president of the Students' Union, and I was the secretary of the Personnel Management Forum those days. And that's how, my own journey started, and I started believing in myself. A lot of credit to this institute called Tata Institute of Social Sciences and my friends and my batchmates who were there with me those days. Sindhu?
It was really interesting to listen to you. I don't know if you realize that, but over the past few minutes, you actually told us a lot about honesty, integrity, diversity, and inclusion. I'm sure everyone's going to agree with me when I say that. And that's huge. Honesty, that's HIDE actually. Honesty, integrity, diversity, and inclusion, so much packed in two stories, especially when you spoke about your hostel life and the incident. I'm sure many of us were transported back to our hostel life. But I think that was your inflection point probably in your life, especially when you spoke about how you felt not to bring disrepute to your family. If you have to extrapolate that, I think that's what leaders are made of. How can I sustain the culture of my organization? And how can I be the brand ambassador of my organization? We'll come to that. But there's one interesting quote that I'm sure you're going to smile when I say that the price of anything is the amount of life that you exchange for it, said Henry David Thoreau. And I'm sure that's something very close to your heart. Can you talk about something where you've paid a heavy price for and you don't regret about it?
Oh, all the time. And that quote, incidentally, is my DP in my WhatsApp, and I think you must have seen that. And you see, the funny thing is, it's only a price if you think you have a choice. To my father, being honest was not a price because he didn't realize that he had an option of being dishonest. So when you don't give yourself that option, then it is no longer a price. I remember before we started Great Place to Work, I was in a multinational bank, and I read in a newspaper interview somewhere that there is this gentleman, Narayan Murthy, and he said in that interview that he set up a company which became very large subsequently, Infosys, without paying any bribe. And subsequently, the same thing was said again by Azim Premji. Now, all you need is a prototype, right? And that was the single biggest reason why I decided that I can also be an entrepreneur. We can have our own organization. And coming back to the price, so therefore, many years back, maybe almost 8 years back, so we had an inspector from Shops and Establishment Act who came to our company in Mumbai, and then he found not one, not two, but 5 non-compliance. We did not have a notice in Marathi. We did not have an attendance register where you are supposed to note down in time, out time. I mean, my people will think I'm crazy if I ask them to note down in time, out time in a register, but that's apparently the law. And therefore, he gave me a notice and a charge sheet. So we got that, and I said, that's great. I don't see the logic, but if that's the law, we have to do it. So my administration manager got a register. We did all the 5 things that we are supposed to do. And that was not the end, because he filed a case. So subsequently, I found out that apparently he had asked for a bribe. And of course, it's not a price, but there is no option. We don't pay bribes. So therefore, he decided to teach us a lesson, and he filed a case. So I and another colleague of mine, Basuri, we went to the courtroom. Now there is this judge, he's wearing a wig. I didn't realize that. I thought it's only in Hindi movies that the judge actually wears a wig, and he's sitting there. And then there is a bunch of, shopkeepers, and there are some people from a multinational, because these guys are expats in suit and, in very formal attire. So everyone goes to, what do you call that? This is Hindi mein katghare kehte hain na, that place where you are supposed to stand, and then the clerk reads out the charge that this is the violation of this, that, and the other. And then he says, Kabul hai. Do you agree? And this person says, Kabul hai. And the judge doesn't even look up. So he says, 5,000 rupee fine, 10,000 rupee fine. And he does bangs with the hammer, and everyone goes and pays the fine. And now when my turn came and he said, Kabul hai. So I said, Kabul nahi hai. And that's the first time the judge looks up like this, from over his glasses. He looks up at me, because nobody in his court probably has said Kabul nahi hai for a very long time. And he said, what do you mean, sir? So I said, look, I am the first person in my entire family to be an entrepreneur. In those days, I was employing only about 30, 40 people. I don't remember the exact number. I employ so many people. Here is a letter from the income tax department complimenting me for being a model income tax payer, even though I am a small business. This gentleman came, he told me these are the 5 non-compliances. I don't understand why this is relevant to my business, but I obviously have to implement it. That is the law. So I told him, I sent him a letter. It has been done. Can you come and inspect and see whether it has been done to your satisfaction? Now you tell me, Mr. Judge, this inspector who is being paid by the government, that means my money and taxpayers' money, is it his job to help me to be compliant? Or am I the kind of person who should be dragged to this honorable court of yours? And he looks at me, then he looks at the entire audience, because that's a stunned silence in that entire courtroom. Now he is in a spot, he has to do something. He gives the biggest ever firing to that inspector, who, by the way, in the last 8 years has not stepped into my office till today. Hopefully he doesn't come tomorrow. But he gives the biggest firing to this inspector who is there in the court, saying that, did you get in the entire Mumbai only one honest guy to come to my court? And then he looks at me, he smiles, and he says, but sir, Unfortunately, the law is blind, 20,000 rupee fine, bang. And they are very well organized. They have an ATM right there. So you have to just go take the money out and give the fine. And the point which I'm trying to make is that 20,000 is not a price. That is an investment, not paying the bribe, because the bribe would have been 1/10 the price of whatever that, and the inconvenience aside, because to me, your values is your key differentiator from others. Today, I started a new company called the Great Manager Institute. 5 of my friends, they're all CEOs. They're all have been my clients. They have come and they have put in money. And the only thing they asked is, Prasenjit, are you going to be in this company? And I said, yes, that's my next venture, Great Manager Institute. And that's what I'm going to do for the next 10 years. We are going to create a global company. Now, do you think somebody would have just put in their money without any negotiation, without asking a single question, if they did not believe that this guy has integrity and he is honest? So I don't know, I gave you a long-winded answer, but my answer is, if you have principles and if you have values, those principles and those values are your biggest assets, and they can never be an excuse for coming second. They must be the reason for coming first. And that's what we have done as a business policy in any business, whether it's Great Place to Work or Great Manager Institute, that you have integrity, and that must be the reason why people should come to you.
That was very powerful, especially the courtroom scene. I felt as if I was watching a movie with your emotions and descriptions. But that aside, you delivered a very powerful message about having conviction to one's ethics, morals, and values, and not being shaken by the external environment, not having that sort of a temptation to say that, okay, just this time, just one time alone. And you also brought out a very important message of how people are tested when they have the resolute to stick to values, how life tests them to see how strong are you with your values. Will you cling on to me, or are you going to go away? That was very powerful. But now, continuing your discussion on values, like you said, people trusted you and invested in the organization, the Great Manager Institute that you started. And when it comes to organization culture, it's leaders who shape the culture, and leaders or the founding members or the board set these values. And these are the ones that are distilled down to every single employee. And many times we find values as a mere wooden plaque in the boardroom. But when you go and ask people of the organization, can you explain what this particular value is? Every single employee possibly has a very different opinion or definition of a value. We would like to hear from you on how do you think leaders can distill values across organization in a very synchronous manner?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, this is my personal view, and others may have other views. Values is not a democratic exercise. I am not going to change my value of integrity or honesty if majority of the votes say that, in today's time and age, let us not talk about integrity and honesty, and let us just say that get it done is the value. Just get it done, right? Now, if leaders create organizations, they cannot sustain those organizations in the long run, because they cannot sustain their own energy if those organizations are not created with the kind of values that they deeply believe in. Now, how those values get worded might be somewhat different. For example, when we did this exercise and our entire team met, they didn't use the word integrity, they didn't use the word honesty. And one person I still remember distinctly, she came up with, and she has a law background. She came up with something to the effect that we must be honorable. So one of our values is be honorable. In fact, it is the first value. Being honorable is the first value. And of course, we defined what does it mean in terms of a few behaviors. But I think there are two things which are very critical, two or three things. And I don't claim that we have done everything very well. I think first and foremost is there have to be stories. So the story that I told you is a story that a lot of people in my organization would know, because there are people who share those stories and they're ready to forgive you and hundreds of sort of faults that you have as a leader, because they believe that you are true to those values. But how do I go to a customer and say that give me more business because I'm honorable? That doesn't seem very logical. So then we had to think through that what is being honorable if you are looking at it from a customer's point of view. And then somebody says, you know, being honorable means commitment, means done. So that's how our customer value proposition got defined. The values are at the core, but how does this value appear to a customer? If you are honorable, then when you give a commitment to a customer, then customer must feel that if you have given a commitment, then it means it will be done. But then the next question that came is, who is in a position to go and give a commitment to a customer with so much confidence that the customer feels that it will be done? So then the obvious answer is, do I have the kind of empowerment and freedom for me to do that? For example, any customer-facing role in at Great Place to Work has a budget of 100,000 rupees. That's not a big budget, but that's good enough for this person to say that, okay, I don't want to charge you for a report, or hello, hey, wait, you need some help. Let me fly down to Bangalore if you are based there, and I'll spend some time with you. So that kind of empowerment and freedom is what we call as employee value proposition. And I think these are three things that I can think about. The first is, do you believe in those values, even if in the short term you may have to pay a price? And I can't give you all the examples of where we have lived by the values and we have seemingly paid the price. In retrospect, in almost all those cases, we actually came out better for it. The second is, if you are role modeling those behaviors, are those stories known to people? Because as the organization grows, you cannot influence the behavior of a lot of your managers and leaders. The stories can. I remember I used to work for an organization called Aisha many years back, and they had a factory at Haryana. And the ruling party those days, they had a youth wing who came and demanded money. And Aisha said, sorry, we can't pay money. That was their policy. So they cut electricity, they cut water supply. The plant was closed till it came to a point where the union and all the employees started demonstrating in that city. And that gentleman was a huge leader, the biggest leader at that point in time. Now, this story was repeated. So when we were in Kolkata and the local Durga Puja committee came and said that, you know, you are a corporate, you have to pay 10,000 rupee donation for Durga Puja. And we said, we are in the community, and being in the community, if people are paying 500 rupees, I would also like to pay 500 rupees for the Durga Puja, but I'm not going to pay 10,000 rupees because there is no policy which says that I'll pay 10,000 rupees for Durga Puja. They say that, you know, you have to stay in this locality. So the youngest member of my team, a gentleman called Nachiket, he came with the keys of the office. Our manager was not there in Kolkata at that time. He came with the keys. He said, and he spoke in Bengali. He said, "Sir, here are the keys of the office. If you want to lock down the office, why don't you lock it down?" And these people are surprised. He said, "At least make a phone call to your head office in Delhi. You'll get permission." They said, "No, they did not get permission for Devi Lal." I am saying the name of the gentleman also. It was not that gentleman, but some goons from his party who was demanding a bribe. So these stories are so powerful that people behave according to those stories. And then, of course, you have to align your customer value proposition and employee value proposition. Sindhu?
I completely agree when you say leaders have to be role models. And from the stories that you shared, what distinctly stood out is it's not just important to keep harping or speaking about those values, but to be seen demonstrating those values. And many times, let's say you have a 10,000 employee organization, it's not very easy for the leader to be seen amongst all the 10,000 employees. And that's where you beautifully said, how can I dissect the values into dimensions that can be perceived by individual stakeholders, especially when you spoke about being honorable might mean commitment to someone, could mean accountability to someone, could mean keeping up the promises. I think it's a beautiful lesson. And of course, about living up to values. What you just said now reminded me of something that I read in this book, Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek, where he says it's very important for leaders to create something called a circle of safety for their employees. So much so that employees are a part of a family. And when they walk in, someone who walks into organization is somebody's father or mother or son or daughter or somebody's brother. And it's very important to look at employees from that perspective and how leaders can go about creating. I think your example actually touched upon the fact that the organization is there behind your back as when you follow the values of the organization. I want to take this discussion a little bit further on safety. How do you think leaders can create that feeling of safety amongst people in the sense that employees feel as long I know the organization will be behind my back? How can we empower employees to that extent?
Yeah. See, there is a fundamental and tectonic shift which is happening in the space of workplace culture. If you look at my generation, during my time, if you are not a doctor, you are not an engineer, you are not a civil servant, or you are not an SBI probationary officer, you are nothing. You are an educated unemployed. And therefore, the biggest driver, the market was for job security. Because even the movies of those days, those who have seen Rajesh Khanna and Amitabh Bachchan during those days would know that the hero goes from office to office with a sign hanging called "No Vacancy." We are the no vacancy generation, right? We are the product of that particular market, which was for job security. And essentially, that changed because supply demand changed, and then suddenly we are hiring signboards came up everywhere. And therefore, we got a set of employees or set of people who I call, and people don't like me when I use the word, as an entitled generation. Because if I am a very talented employee, then I have options and I have a sense of entitlement. And therefore, the market was for employee experience. That was good news for a great place to work. And the currency in this market is careers. We need accelerated careers. What has happened post-COVID is that people are not willing to put all their eggs in one basket anymore. It doesn't matter how large an organization you are, and you can show a 20-year career path, but they know you have really no clue about what is going to happen 2 years from now, because the next disruption is not going to be a virus, it will be something else. Right? And we can only guess, right? In just before COVID, everybody was talking about AI, ML, technology, Now everybody is talking about genetic engineering and biology and things like that, right? So therefore, this is the startup generation that we have right now. And the problem with the startup generation is the rate of change is is ahead of an individual's ability to cope. And therefore, previously we used to assume that the raw material quality is already tested because you are recruiting from IIT, you are recruiting from IIM or any other institute, then the raw material is there. Today, 3 out of 10 actually require help. 1 out of 10 require serious psychiatric help. So therefore, even if you are not a great place to work and you are not doing it for altruistic reason, you cannot ignore employee wellness. And therefore, this is so much so that we were forced or we decided to create a separate framework on employee wellness altogether. And how do you really support individuals to use the organization as a platform for self-realization or for realizing one's potential? We changed the framework at Great Place to Work People Practice Assessment, where today realizing human potential is one of the key outcomes that we are looking at. And just to summarize, the big difference that I see is previously we used to say that we have to really tap the individual's potential to achieve business results. I think today we are saying we have to tap the organization's potential to achieve the human potential. The organization is just a platform, it is just a stage which is available for you to try and realize your potential. And may not be in one organization, it could or may not, obviously may or not be in one career, it could be in multiple organizations over multiple careers.
And I also, like you said, believe that organizations should even start passing on that message that we are there for you to leverage the potential that you have. We give you the opportunities and you leverage the potential that you have. So on that note, how did Great Places to Work happen?
Oh, wow. You see, if you really look at some of the stories that I talked about, integrity was very important, fairness was very important, and Tata Institute, the sense of belonging that I got and the encouragement that I got was the result of, was the reason why probably I could take up some leadership roles subsequently. In all of this, there was one common theme, which was that of freedom. And poverty is not romantic. If you are poor, you want freedom from poverty, right? You want to know that if I have to take off and spend a week in Panchgani, I don't have to worry about my bank balance. So now these values were the cornerstone of an organization I wanted to create. Now the question is, what kind of organization? I was very clear that it cannot be Bhattacharya and Associates. I wanted to make a bigger impact. And what we realized those days, 2007 was the year and probably the only year when India's GDP growth was more than 10%. It was a double-digit kind of GDP growth. We were convinced India is going to be the next economic superpower. China was ahead of us. The Chinese model, however, also produced 200 million migrant workers. Now, these migrant workers were like bonded laborers. They were living in fairly subhuman conditions. So we said, is there a better model than the China model? China, by the way, now has 260 million migrant workers, right? Now, we saw that in the ITES industry, we have created 4 million people who have good quality of life. Why? Because an AppTech, NIIT, and those kind of organizations came. So in a nutshell, we said that if India can be a nursery for talent, where people can upgrade, people can acquire new skills, and they command a higher value in the global market than the quality of life of a large number of people. Remember, this 4 million IT people, everyone knows somebody from TCS, Infosys, Cognizant. There are 36 million textile workers. You don't know them because they are not your neighbor. They are not in the same building. So therefore, the idea was we want to make India a great place to work. Because if India is a great place to work, then large number of people will get an opportunity to sort of move up the value chain, upgrade their skills, which means that they get better salary, better market value, and they have a better quality of life for themselves and their families. And today, therefore, we still pursue that vision, except a slight change. Today, we say we want to make India a great place to work for all.
That's an interesting journey, Mr. Prasenjit. So I'm sure when you started off Great Places to Work, and you must have been a startup at that point of time. Possibly the term startup was possibly not very popular at that time. You were another company. So what I would like to hear from you is how did you go about convincing people that there is a need for something like Great Places to Work, especially when you're selling something intangible? You're trying to make it tangible. You're trying to make people see and experience the benefits. How did you go about convincing them?
Well, fortunately for us, Great Place to Work in US had a very powerful partner called Fortune. And Fortune's January issue, those days, called the 100 Best Companies to Work For in America, was the #1 best-selling issue of Fortune and #1 media tracker. So we bought 200 copies of that issue. And we took one copy and we went to everybody whom we met and we said, we are bringing this to India. And people wanted to be, in the same study, which was being done by Fortune magazine in US. India, Fortune was not there those days. So Business World was our partner initially, subsequently Economic Times. But frankly, there is nothing as powerful as an idea whose time has come. And that the fact that the supply demand was in favor of talent, the fact that winning in the talent market was being considered as a prerequisite to win in the market for customers. Fact that McKinsey and many others were already writing a lot about the war for talent, and the fact that there was no standard which could be considered as a gold standard, where you cannot influence the process by a variety of other things. All of this came together. And once organizations started becoming great workplaces or being in that list, they started talking about it. So you will be surprised to know that in 14 years, we are a very successful business. Our net spend on marketing, advertising is zero. We don't have a marketing budget, right? And yet there are very few people who do not know about Great Place to Work. That is because, just to give you a last quick story, there is never a year where I haven't met 5 or 6 people who would come up to me and say, hey, you don't know me, but in 2009, I was a summer trainee, at Oberoi. And my summer trainee project was Great Place to Work. Now, the reality is that there are thousands and thousands of people who are trying to make their workplaces better workplaces. And even though we don't know about a lot of them, our job is to create that standard so that people can then come and say that, yes, we are also there amongst the companies with high trust, pride, and camaraderie.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So that resonates very well with an article of yours that I read in LinkedIn. I think you published it a year back, where you were talking about work post-COVID, and where you said in the market of relevance, the currency is learning. I'm going to repeat that. In the market of relevance, the currency is learning. That particular line just caught my attention. And to quickly summarize, you also said in post-COVID era, organizations should start focusing more on building people managers and resilience is the key. And in terms of responsibilities of employees, you've also mentioned about the fact that employees should move from a passive to an active mindset. Can you please elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think this is something which is very close to my heart in terms of the change that is happening today in context of employees. And I think we did a very big disservice when we started this entire employee engagement and discretionary effort kind of journey, is that we assume that employee is just an object and somebody called the organization, somebody called the manager is going to do some mumbo jumbo, and suddenly the employee will get excited and he will start putting in discretionary effort. We didn't realize that 50% of that is lying within the employee itself. Why is it that in the same organization, some people are happy and some people are not? You have done so much of research on happiness, so you have more insight on this than probably I have. So I think the first thing that we are talking about is that our measurement should also change. Instead of saying my manager makes expectations clear, why can't I say I have done my best to clarify expectations? Why are we continuously reinforcing that you are the passive subject of somebody's motivation and somebody's inspiration? Why are you not inspired by yourself? What are you doing to inspire your manager? I'm not saying employee has 100% of the responsibility, but 50%, yes. And I think that's the change that is going to happen. Everybody is going to have a 2x2 kind of matrix where they are going to say, what is my market value and what is my contribution to my company, right? And based on that, they will have one or two careers. But in all of this, there are two things which are very important. The first is what I call as daily discipline, right? And for example, I've been trying to practice some of it successfully, some not so successfully. For the last 2 years, I walk 10,000 steps every day, right? Now, that kind of discipline is something you need to have, otherwise you will not be able to sustain in the post-COVID world. And I think the second very important thing which we don't talk enough is how do I move from a sense of entitlement to a sense of gratitude? Everything that has happened with me has happened because somebody decided to help me. My very first landlord, when I was searching for office in Mumbai, I didn't have money to pay for a deposit. So I explained to him what I'm doing, what I'm trying to do, etc. He said, "Acha, koi baat nahi, aap paisa kama lo aur aap 6 mahine mein deposit de do mujhe." Now, I was amazed that why is this gentleman doing that? I said, "Sir, can you explain why I did do this?" He said, "When I saw you, I was reminded of myself 40 years back when I came to Bombay. My chartered accountant, he said, look, he doesn't charge much. Now, by the way, he wrote a book on management and he asked me to write the foreword. And that was such a delight for me. And I'm so honored." And he said, wait, you have to pay my fees. Why don't I have other clients. Why don't I talk about you to my other clients and see whether they can give you business so that you can pay me my fee? My technology partner, Dheeraj Bhagat, he said, instead of paying me that fee, because I know you are just a startup, you are starting, why don't I build it for you? Don't pay me the fee now, but just pay me 5% of your revenue that you are earning using my technology. And I don't know whether it happens everywhere or it happens only in Bombay, but a sense of gratitude is the single biggest reason why I think I have survived. And I'm so deeply grateful. And I think that would be my last thing to all my young friends, that if you develop a sense of gratitude and you have so much to be grateful for, and I do not know how, Nehali can say how HR AI runs, but there are some people who are doing it and they're not getting stock options and high salaries and valuation and so on and so forth. Isn't this something to be really grateful for, that all of us are getting it on a platter because some people have decided to help us? So that's my last thing, that if we are talking about wellness, the secret of wellness is gratitude. Probably that is also the secret of happiness, but you will know more about that.
Thank you. I suddenly was seeing a halo behind you because I wanted to tell you, it appears as though life has come a full circle from the way you started talking about how honesty and integrity was distilled, and you very beautifully summed it up by saying gratitude is the key. It was a beautiful conversation. I'm opening up questions from the audience. So if you have questions, kindly type it in the chat box. We have one question where we have one member from the audience asking you to explain employee value proposition with an example. You did touch about
Hi, Sindhu. Sorry to interrupt. Can we run a short poll before we start the question and answer session?
Sure, Nehali.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Can we have the poll, please? We will wait for a few seconds and we can start with Q&A.
Sure.
So would request all the participants to please put your questions in the chat box. Yeah, we can start with Q&A.
Thank you, Nehali. Yes, those were interesting results. So yes, stories worked, and I think everyone's glued to the session. Thanks to you for that. So you did touch upon employee value proposition. Can you explain that with an example, please?
Yeah. So I think we also say that at the core of a culture are the values which are there. And very often, people do not understand the link between the value and values and the employee value proposition and the customer value proposition. So therefore, if you have a few strong values, because values define the boundary conditions, that if it is not in line with values, it is not going to happen in your organization. Doesn't matter what is your strategy or anything else, right? Now, there are two things which is linked to the values. Employee value proposition is one of them, and I'm going to come to that in a minute. So let me take an example of another value, which is, let us say, one of our values is fairness. Be fair to self and others. Now, we have to convert this value for our customer. And so we came across a we sort of designed a customer value proposition where we say that redressal of customer issues is going to be really prompt, very prompt. It's immediate redressal of customer issues. But then we say that how would fairness come across to an employee, right? What is going to be fairness for an employee? And that is where in the employee value proposition, we came across, we basically said that fairness for employee would mean that if you have the potential, we'll give you the opportunity. So your career growth is not dependent on your age. It is not dependent on a variety of other factors. For example, in our organization, we don't have this thing that you can only become a senior consultant from being a consultant. We have a colleague of mine who is 26, 27-year-old is earning more than 1 crore because he's got, he had that potential. So fairness for my our employees also mean that we have 100% transparency. We in fact have a saying 100, 100, 100. 100% of the information is available to 100% of the people, 100% of the time. And it is, some people are surprised, and there are some of my friends here who know us, so they can vouch for what I'm saying, that even in 2007 when we started, everyone knew everybody's salary. My salary was known to everybody else, and therefore employee value proposition essentially are the reasons why people, the kind of people you want to attract, will join you and stay with you. Right? And at least in our case, we have had number of people who actually took salary cuts to come and join us, and many of them have stayed with us for a very long time. And the reason is not money, but it is the alignment between their values and the employee value proposition.
That's beautiful, because once you see an organization and yourself aligned to each other, that's ultimate. Compensation sometimes takes a back seat, because when people who are focused on the long term, they realize that fulfillment and enrichment is more important, because when I come back, do I feel enriched and do I feel I've grown? Thank you for that. We have another question. How do we check on integrity of a prospective candidate while hiring? This is from Ms. Karuna Sharma.
Yeah. So I think that's a very good question. And I don't think I'll be able to give you a pat answer to this, but there are so many scenarios. Let's say I am or I was till some time back the CEO of Great Place to Work, and I, let us say, have another company which is making losses, right? So I get a salary of, let us say, X amount from Great Place to Work. I tell them that instead of giving me a salary, I'll raise a voucher, I'll raise an invoice from my second company, pay the same amount to the second company. There's no extra amount that you have to pay, for services rendered. And the advantage is that the second company is not making profits, so therefore they don't have to pay tax on that. Now, as far as I am concerned, my company has not paid anything more. Now, if you are hiring an accountant, you give a situation like this, and depending on the role you give, because in every role there are these gray areas, you give this situation. Now, 50% of the people that I have interviewed, because we did hire for our accounts role, they said, technically this is allowed, income tax cannot, cannot come and question it, and so on and so forth. But the reality is that it is not about the letter of the law. It is the spirit of the law. If I am supposed to get a salary, I would take it as salary, pay income tax. Even if I have another loss-making company where the same money can be put in and they can save on some tax, maybe it is a gray area. But as far as we are concerned, there is no such thing as a gray area. So I think it is, when you are hiring smart people, and if you have enough experience, if you're running a business, to know that there are certain things which seemingly are smart things to do. But if you are somebody with impeccable integrity, you will question even those things. For example, and this is like, so proud of my people. We have two organizations. Great Place to Work is started operating its office, and Great Manager is still working from home. So therefore, in some documents, etc., I have to put the address of Great Manager Institute. So therefore, I told my accountant that you please put the same address, because we have hired a business center, which is the office of Great Place to Work. Put down that office as Great Manager Institute. So she said, how much should I debit Great Manager Institute? How much of the rent should I debit? I said, what do you mean debit? There is nobody from Great Manager Institute who is coming and using it. Why should we debit? He said, no, then you cannot put it. Because now, she's gone to the other extreme, and I find it very irritating sometimes, but I feel so proud. Right. And these are the kind of people, and I think half of it is when you recruit, but nobody really, very few people. The crook is a crook anyway. He's going to steal your money, and I don't think you are smart enough to figure it out when you are interviewing him. But thankfully, 99% of the people don't want to be crooks. They want to be in an organization that allows them to be honest. And when they see that this organization is really paranoid about honesty, then they start behaving like that.
Very well answered, Mr. Prasenjit. I'm just reminded of different stories of integrity. I think today's conversation largely touched upon integrity, which I believe is a very important value. I keep telling people, okay, you ask this question, you're zooming, or you're driving your car, and you're arriving at a red signal. And if there's no cop, what would you do? I think that will answer whether the person follows integrity or not, and the person honors, consciously. Are you going to stop, or are you going to zoom on? And that is where a person's behavior on integrity is reflected, even in tiny things outside work. It's sort of a part of DNA. So Nehali and...
I just want to add one thing, is that integrity, or values for that matter, is never black and white in a person. It is practice. So if you practice stopping in the red light, regardless of whether somebody is there or not there, the chances are that you are not going to skip the red light. But once in a while, in a blue moon, you may actually skip. And then you go back to practice. And I think there is a myth that you are either honest or you are dishonest. I know I talked about those gray areas, but it is a story that somebody narrated to me long back. They're saying that this Indian scientist discovered this formula, secret formula, and then there is an enemy nation that wanted to take it, and he will not give it because you can kill him, but he will not give the formula. They kidnapped his young daughter, and this young daughter was hung upside down on a vat which is full of acid. And this man, the scientist, is nading, I'll not give the formula, I'll not give, do what you want. And then they keep, putting the rope down till the hair of this young girl, catches fire because of the acid. And at that point in time, the scientist says, "Ruk jao." This is like what happens in Hindi movies. So never ever trust your values, because you will get complacent. You are not perfect. You are going to compromise on your values unless you practice it every single day, day and night. Sorry, I've taken a lot of your time. Over to you.
No, I think that was a very profound example. We seldom come across people who said that you're not perfect, right? Like you said, there's nothing called black and white. It's important to embrace the gray and accept the gray area as well, instead of just branding someone black or white. Thank you very much, Mr. Prasenjit. It was a fantastic conversation with you. I was indeed looking forward to interesting conversations, but I think this surpassed everything. We started off with understanding what values, ethics, and principles shaped you through your wonderful, and I would say candid and honest stories that made it so relatable, to the fact on how TISS added that flavor into you and sculpting you as a human being and professional. Very interesting to listen to your challenges and the way you stood up to your values. You actually demonstrated a lot of life lessons. At the risk of repetition, it's about how are we, what sort of conviction do we have to our principles and values, and how life can test us so many times and even tempt us to say, are you sticking to me? Are you moving away from me? Not giving up, acting as a role model, spreading that example of values, how organizations can create great places to work, what sort of culture can leaders demonstrate, create, disseminate, and most importantly, how integrity is the core value of any human being. Thank you very much. I think this is one conversation I'm going to cherish for a very long time. And there is this quote that I very often say, and I think it just befits this conversation, something by Helen Keller, when she said, the most beautiful things in life are those that cannot be seen or touched. They can only be felt, whether it's a great place to work or a great human being or values. What's important is how much we make that beautiful feeling being felt amongst the people. Thank you very much. And over to you, Nehali.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sindhu, for taking us through this insightful conversation and journey that unveiled different characters and perspective. As always, thank you so much for moderating this session so beautifully, and thank you so much for concluding this session so well. Last but not the least, thank you so much, Prasenjit, for sharing your perspective and insight, which I'm sure all of us, all our participants would have benefited. It was a truly great learning opportunity for all of us, and we look forward to host you soon in our other initiatives. So thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you so much, Nehali and Sindhu. Have a great day. Bye.
Yeah. So before we conclude today's session, we would also want to thank all the associations, Geisha, NASSCOM COE, LinkedIn Local, TLE, Telgrow, Wiki, and ClipTalk for supporting HRAI and its event. To know more about this association, would request you to kindly visit the link posted in the chat window. Thank you so much once again to all the participants. Do join us for our next webinar on the Dialogue Masterclass series in association with Great Manager Institute India, where 5 masters will be sharing their ideas, initiatives, and strategies from 22nd November to 26th November on the topic Leading People in the Current Times. Requesting everyone to please register for this event. The link for the same has been shared in the chat window. Thank you so much once again. See you soon. Stay safe, take care, bye for now. Thanks, Shyam. We can conclude this session.